Hi there, this is Jan Andersson with MrPEX. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the new controls that we have recently introduced here over the past year or so. More of a soft launch than anything really, although it's been in our catalog here for the past probably year, I would guess. Anyways, wanted to talk a little bit about who we joined up with, a company called Salus, and they have proven to have a very reliable Zigbee network control, which is the wireless protocol that they use. And in the past, wireless control have not been super reliable for the most part. And we have found that this particular Zigbee network seems to be quite the way to go. So we decided to jump in, and we have worked with them on some of the wireless controls and additional components that you will see here in the introduction. So in addition to some wireless products, they do also have some wired controls. We have decided to really only get involved with a couple of the wire controls, and the majority of the rest of it is going to be the wireless package. All right, so let's jump in. Let's start with the wired package. And the wired products that we now have introduced are the 3-wire programmable radiant thermostat. This replaces the old 741, as it was called, which was a Honeywell platform with the sensor. This particular one is also powered 3-wire, so there's no batteries involved with it. And you can buy the sensor optionally separately. So if you want to program the thermostat, you can do that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It does give you the opportunity for doing that. So it's a simple, very economical stat to be used for floor sensing, for floor warming systems, etc. And the more interesting part that we are actually introducing is a auto balancing actuator. This is very unique technology, and it's been around for a little bit here now, but we decided that this is a really good product for our offering. It more or less is a, I would say, troubleshooting or systems where you might have a little balancing issue, bigger rooms with multiple exposures for north and south, or solar gain or no solar gain and whatnot, with multiple loops in the same package. So with the 2 sensors that come with the sensor or with the actuator, it will basically function like with pulse width modulation to maintain a standard delta T across that particular loop. So it's a low power actuator, and so when there's no call for heat, it closes. When it calls for heat, it basically opens up and then starts basically balancing and maintaining the supply and the return with a pulse width modulation protocol to maintain 13 degrees from supply to return. 13 degrees is kind of a funny number. It is a European or metric or Celsius number that is converted. We are looking at potentially getting that tightened up to about a 10-degree delta T, or you can set it to maybe a 20-degree delta T. But essentially, it does the same thing where it maintains, where if you're getting a little bit too much or too little, it actually will balance that out for you. And so it's a great retrofit for some of those rooms where you have found corner of it might be a little bit overheating, or maybe even not hot enough. So this is an additional product that can certainly be added to any of the systems that are existing. It is a, you don't need any particular adapters, which means that you just screw that thing on. It finds its own position where the close-off pressure is and so forth. And so there's really no additional, settings that need to be done with this particular actuator. So a great little addition for some of those projects where you might have some troubles. Then we're moving into our wireless products, and this is kind of an interesting platform in that we have the ability to do many, many different things. And the whole system really starts out with our universal gateway. And, in most homes nowadays, you're going to have a Wi-Fi, or you're going to have a router with a Wi-Fi signal, basically getting on the internet and whatnot. What this gateway will do is we'll connect to your router and get access to the internet. And with our smart home app, now the MrPEX app, you can then enter basically any of the information through your app, and it comes into your home, in through the universal gateway, and then able to control and see all the components that are in your system. It is built up by a mesh functionality, and so it does help itself kind of find the best signals and making sure that it's all nice and robust for when you're working with it. Of course, the gateway then sits and controls all the Zigbee networks, and you can actually connect up to 200 different components on this particular system. And we can talk about the components here in a little bit when we get into that a little bit further. But it allows you to actively control things remotely. You can utilize your app to do it, or you can hop on a website and you can actually control it from either your computer website, or you can have your app with it. But it is essentially a great gateway to get into seeing what you want to do with it. Another interesting part about it is that it is Alexa approved and compatible. And so you can certainly get into your Alexa app, and after your system is set up, Alexa can be then programmed to control all your MrPEX components through this. Simply asking Alexa to do certain things will then allow you to turn up the temperature, turn off a lamp, and whatnot, depending on what components that you have connected to this system. So this is kind of the basis for everything. And we're going to start talking about the hydronic controls, the zoning controls a little bit, and then we'll move into some of the smart home applications that we can get into with this package. The really fun thing about it is that it also is a gateway that has some programmability, customizable, the one-touch programmability and whatnot. So you can decide that when things are happening in your system, you can have the system automatically sense that and send you a text or do some different things with it. So it is a really neat product that now gives you some opportunity to go beyond just zoning your radiant system and so forth. Using the app, of course, adding and deleting any of the different components that you have in your system makes it very easy to use that. So not spending a whole lot of time on this particular thing, because you can get away with a lot of different things on this particular gateway, whether it's built-in rules and whatnot. So we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the zoning packages here. So the wireless hydronic products are going to be basically an array of products that we decided to be the most important things that we're going to be obviously controlling throughout the system. And we do have, of course, the gateway in the middle with a smart app, and that basically can access everything else. We have 8-zone wireless controller, and this is essentially for manifolds where you have actuators or zone valves, and you basically will mount this controller on the wall. You will connect the wired actuators, like actuators or zone valve motors, right into the unit, and wirelessly, your radiant thermostats will then communicate with this controller. We then have some wireless boiler relays, which is an interesting concept where your TT terminals for your boiler, for instance, in this case, would be connected into this wireless boiler relay, and whenever there's a zone that calls for heat throughout the system, the controllers will then send a signal and turn the boiler on without having to run any wires for that as well. The wireless smart relay is another little functionality. You can have a lot of different smart relays on your system. You can do them dry or powered, and we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But that's a great retrofit product for where you have a thermostat that needs to be replaced, and you can't run a wire to where you want the thermostat to be. You can now have a wireless thermostat connected to a relay and connecting back into the actual old system that you have. Wireless pump controllers, so pump relays essentially from like a regular Taco style pump relay, but with a wireless zoning opportunity coming into that. Of course, you would wire your pump into it, but your zoning would then be controlled from the wireless thermostat. Then the last thing that we have here on the hydronic side of things is the wireless actuator, or the it's basically a radiator valve that is a radiator valve motor that you can utilize a wireless thermostat for. So if you're getting into some apartment buildings where you have radiators and you wanted to start zoning them, you can simply put one of these wireless actuators on it, and we'll talk about that later on. So those are the main hydronic control packages that we have to work with. The wireless radiant thermostat, I should say, also acts as a sensor for the floor. So you can add your floor sensor to this whole thing. You can program it. It is a very interesting functionality where you can program it with actuators, zone controllers, pump relays, or smart relays, and it does know exactly how everything is connected in the system with that. So it's a fairly simple process. Of course, getting to know it the first time through is, of course, one of the challenges with many new control packages. But once you have it figured out, it actually works really slick. And we have not had any real issues with any of these at all. So it's a really pleasant surprise, obviously. The wireless controller, again, powering it up, it comes with an onboard transformer. You can control up to 8 zones with 24-volt output for actuators, and you can have 3 amps max per zone. So if you wanted to gang some actuators into a zone, you can certainly do that with the new low voltage actuators that we have, especially the 4-wire or 2-wire actuators that we now have are only 1 amp per, and actually the self-balancing actuator is only half an amp per zone, but I don't know if you would use that on the normal situation. You can control pump, or you can control a boiler output with some delays and offsets. And you can have an internal or an external antenna. Most people get away with an internal antenna. If you're in a location where you think there's going to be too much distraction for the signal, you can certainly just run an external antenna and connect it to it. It does have a normally open, normally closed for the actuator opening and closing, allowing you to do some interesting cooling situations. Although that is not super common, but it is available to do so. You can actually run up to 9 of these controllers in parallel. So you can do quite a large system, with these controllers in parallel, ganging them together, if you will. You can run 32 of these controllers in one system, if you will, or on one gateway. So the gateway is kind of the system, if you will, and you can have 200 components connected to it, and that includes 32 of these zone valve controllers that we have. The pump relays, same thing. Very much a similar functionality. Of course, you will connect your pump to the controller, obviously, rather than actuators, and controlling them with zones, just like you would, normally with a zone pump relay. You do have master slave and priority and exercise functionality with it. You can also connect the external antenna if you need to on these particular units. That might become helpful in some of the areas, again, if you're in a basement where you may have a lot of steel or concrete that might be in the way for the signal. So if you look at your typical application, you're going to have your actuators connected to the controller. It could be your normal 2-wire actuators, or it could be your balancing actuators. Up to 8 thermostats can be connected. Of course, you don't have to use all of them, but per box, obviously, you're going to need to have that. Your boiler pump relay, which I show on the right-hand side here, certainly is an interesting product that, again, if any thermostat from any of these actuators or zone boxes call for heat, you will trigger and turn the pump and the boiler on by the TT terminals, which is really a unique way to do it. The boiler relay can also be used in a single mode. So there's basically an RX1 and an RX2 setting. And then the RX1 setting is when you basically use it in the full system, and you only have one of these boiler relay controllers per system, or per gateway, I should say. And then basically that controls that relay. You can also have another relay set into RX2, but only one additional one per gateway. And that basically allows you, when you're in the RX2 mode, to do a 1-to-1 connection. So if you have a wireless thermostat connecting right to that relay for a zone valve control or or whatever you want to control with that. So that gives you that functionality. The other relay then we have is the smart relay. And this is a very interesting addition because, like I said, for retrofitting, where you want to add a bunch of new thermostats and you don't have a really good way to run your thermostat wire, this really makes a big difference then, where each relay would then be plugged into to where the TT terminals on your zone controller would be. Let's say you do take a zone relay. And you can actually, instead of the thermostat connecting to the zone relay, you would actually have this smart relay connecting to it. And then just simply via a wireless signal, you connect each one and turn them on and off. So this is kind of an interesting concept for it, and you can use it for many different applications. It doesn't have to be heat or cool. It could be for anything else that you might want to control it with. These components obviously are overridden by on the app. You can pull it up on the app and actually turn it on or off manually if you wanted to do that, to kind of override functionality, which is also a nice feature to have. Then your TRV actuator, or your radiator valve actuator, actually does have the ability to run 2 AA batteries, and that basically is going to run you 18 months or so of battery power, depending on how much you're opening and closing it. We do have a lithium-ion battery pack that could be added on to the whole situation, which extends it up to many years of service with that part of it. So again, it's a self-learning actuator. You just screw it right onto the valve, and it finds its own open and closed. And it does have a frost protection and a battery loss protection, where it actually opens up a little bit. So essentially, you can have multiple of these connected in a situation where you have radiators in an apartment or something like that. So essentially, you can do up to 6 radiators on one thermostat, and then you can control many different areas, hot water or steam, depending on what you got going on that part of it. So it allows you then to zone and specify rooms that are typically too cold or too warm to now all of a sudden have zoning and capability of controlling that a lot better. You can also then get involved with your smart relay instead of direct connection with your wireless actuator. If you do have power available, you can simply use our 2-wire actuator and put it right onto the radiator valve, and then use a smart relay with a wireless connection. It's much the same functionality. So if you look at the functionality here, you can see that it goes directly to your smart relay or the smart actuator. And there's really no other components, so it's a little bit of an easier install. But if you didn't want to deal with battery-powered items, you basically then would go to the smart relay and your normal actuator, which would be a pretty easy way to do it as well. But nonetheless, a little extra work. All of it would function the same through your app, and you can just program everything in through there if you wanted to, or you can do it on your thermostat also. So those are the wireless zoning actuators or products that we have available for the hydronic systems. Because of the gateway now being able to communicate with many of the other components that Salis has available, we decided to bring some of those features in so that you could take advantage of them in whatever, standalone or together with your other systems. So some of these smart home devices that we have, want to just go briefly over them with you so that you can see what we have available and a little bit of the functionality that each one has. So if you look at, again, you have your gateway hub in the middle, the app, just like you would with the hydronic stuff. Some of the things that are available, some of the forced air thermostats that Salis has available, we can connect those into a system, which is kind of interesting because many times do you have an air system potentially in your package or in your system, and then you have a lot of hydronic systems too, and now you can commingle on the same system or the same app to control all different things separately. We have embedded door sensors that could trigger things. We have window door sensors also. We have a smart plug. And the smart plug are kind of interesting because you just plug them into any power outlet, and it basically finds the gateway, the hub via Zigbee, and now you can program that plug to do whatever you want it to do. If it's a light in the living room, for instance, you can program it to come on and turn off automatically, or you can manually turn things on. You can have something turn on if there's a certain temperature that reaches. So let's say you have a portable air conditioning unit in a room, for instance, you can plug that into it and have a remote air temperature sensor in there. And when the air temperature gets to be a certain point, then you can, trigger that outlet, and it'll turns on then whatever unit is connected to that smart plug. I have many of them in my home doing many different things. So they're kind of fun to play around with. And one of the things too that we have now available is the water leak detector. And those are kind of cool because they are a lot advanced, a lot more advanced than some of the other things that are out there now. This little puck, which we'll talk about in a minute, does have many ways of connecting itself, and you can have many of these in your system, and they will simply sense the moisture detection wherever you put it, and it will send a signal into your system, and that system can then decide to just send you a text message or to then trigger a valve, for instance, which we now have water shutoff valve, and actually motors now available too that you could put on a main valve, for instance. So if you wanted to shut the water off into your home or cabin or whatever you have, you can certainly do that as an automated thing when it senses the water detection. And basically what you have here is some of the different ways you can install it. So you can get into a sump install. So you can do a backup install or backup detection for a sump pump. So let's say the float or the sump pump itself goes out. When the sensor then senses the water, it triggers then a call for you to do something about it. Obviously, on the sump, you're going to have to go down and fix it. But if it's a water sourced item, you can essentially just turn off the valve to the water source. You could do the surface install where you have the little two sensors going down to a floor level or any kind of hidden area where it actually then the two sensors would connect and they would know that it's water there. You can simply put the puck in its holder, and the holder does have the sensors on it. You can also lay the puck flat on the floor, just like a little bug, and put it underneath a dishwasher or underneath a washing machine. It will trigger itself also the same way. So it is a very, very unique little trigger to have available, for some of these areas. And we currently have the 3/4 inch valve motor body put together. We're kind of working on getting the valve motor set up instead, which I think is a little bit of an easier connection where the valve motor will actually just trigger any of the ball valves that are already installed in the system. So you can have one or two or three or multiple of these little water sensors, and they can trigger the one incoming valve. Or you can have, if you do have multiple areas where you have a maybe it's just for a garage hose or something like that, you can trigger that as well and turn only the valve off that goes to that area. So again, many flexibilities that you can do with that. So anyways, that is essentially a quick overview of some of the components we have. We certainly have on our website at www.mrpexsystems.com. You can go to the resources, and under the resources, you have installation guides, and each of these components have a information sheet and an instruction sheet that you can review if you're looking for more information on this. So, but anyways, thanks for listening, and thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.